Hi, everybody. Mike Bloom here, back with another Survivor 50 preseason podcast as I'm giving you what you need to know about the iconic cast of Survivor 50. Today, I'm here to define for you all what the hell a Riz God is. We are talking Rizo Velovic, one of the most recent additions to the Survivor 50 cast, considering that he ended up playing Survivor and finishing a season like a week and a half before he returned for Survivor 50. So we'll talk a lot about his first stint in Fiji before we get into the quick turnaround into his second. Whether you are an Ariz Capelian, whether you are an Athi Riz, or every denomination in between, here's what you need to know about this guy. And of course, I am joined by the woman, the myth, the legend, Liana Boraas.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, I am happy that you mentioned that because all children are welcome at the Riz God table. So I think we are just here to talk about what this guy is going to bring to season 50 because man, a turnaround playing season 49 going into 50 is wild. So I'm really curious to see how he's going to do and hopefully we can break everything down for you.
Well, you talk about all children are welcome. That might be including Rizzo himself, because this is somebody who is the youngest person of the cast of Survivor 50. We're going to talk about that in a bit. Got some stats to break down for you all in just a tad. But I'm intrigued to hear from you, Liana, because listen, there may or may not have been whispers on the wind, little spiders talking about the fact that Rizzo may or may not have been one of the 49 people picked to be on 50 before his season even happened. So, having watched the entirety of 49, how do you look upon this casting choice in retrospect?
hmm Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because I feel like I got dessert served first. I knew that Rizzo was going to be on the season. So I was kind of looking for those things that would justify why he was on the season instead of just sort of taking in everything that Rizzo had to offer and then getting the surprise at the end of finding out he was on 50. So I think that definitely it sort of changed how you kind of watch the season because you are looking out for that. But regardless, he was a constant narrator. And I think that that is sort of when I think about Rizzo's role, I mean, clearly he had a strategic element to him as well. But it felt like the show constantly was going to Rizzo to provide context on situations, to give us a cheeky line when he goes fishing in the ocean, to tell us we're cooked. So I feel like that sort of narration role is something that the show leaned on heavily for Rizzo as he is an extremely charismatic individual.
Yeah, I also think that Rizzo kind of fills, not to say there are archetypes necessarily cast for returning player seasons, but I have noticed a trend of the last few. I look back to Winners at War, the casting of someone like Adam Klein. I look to Survivor Game Changers, the casting of Adam's fellow millennial, Zeke. I even look back, arguably, to the OG Survivor All Stars over 20 years ago and the casting of our lovely podfather, Rob Cesternino. And I do feel like a lot of All-Star seasons want to sort of fill this role for at least one person, occupying the slot of like excitable young super fan, because it serves as a bit of an audience analog, right? Like I can bet you dollars to donuts that we will get some sort of confessional from Rizzo in the premiere of 50 being like, I can't believe I'm standing here with Coach and Ozzy and Sari. He's able to sort of speak to the magnanimity of the cast and this concept without the show necessarily needing to say. And not to say, as we'll get into, that Rizzo didn't necessarily earn a place in his own right. But I think that could be a reason why he ends up, being one of the people selected for this. And not also because he may be the only person that recognizes Mr. Beast when he makes a cameo appearance in 50.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that it is actually interesting because when I talk about Rizzo as the narrator in season 50, potentially he's coming in as almost the voice of the audience, right? I mean, maybe not necessarily about the Mr. Beast thing of it all, but certainly about a lot of the returning players, because he's going to be able to recognize them. He's going to be the one they're going to cut to. It's like, I can't believe, just weeks ago I was, sitting on my couch and now here I am. I'm playing with Colby and Sari and all these greats of Survivor history. And I think that that's also what I'm sure producers want is season 50 is this capstone. It's supposed to be this super monumental moment. And so Rizzo, I think, is going to give them exactly what they want in terms of hyping up and like getting everybody excited for the cast and for 50 in general.
Well, Liana, you say Rizzo is a narrator, but why don't you give a spin in the narrator's seat yourself? Why don't you tell the folks at home the story of the man, the myth, the legend, Rizgod, Riz God, baby, in season 49?
Yeah. So I would summarize Rizzo's story as finding a core group of people, remaining loyal to the core group, making some flashy idol plays or maybe not so idol plays along the way as Rizzo found an idol in the early days in pre-merge, held on to it with a lot of us saying the cojones to not play the idol throughout multiple episodes where it looked like he would be in danger and using it almost as this defensive weapon. And then finally, being able to make it to the end and having his season cut short by losing in Final Four fire making. And I think that all of those elements really play into Rizzo as a character, right? Sort of that initial loyalty, staying loyal, little bit of a ballsy play, and then unfortunately, ultimately, losing it to fire, which if he didn't have a ton of time to practice in between, if he had to go right back out there, I am certainly nervous for that element, but maybe he'll have some time to practice with the greats. Ozzy's out there. He can teach him.
Well, listen, he may not be able to make fire, but his time on 49 was straight fire. Let's get some facts about Rizzo that we experienced over the past few months. Rizzo is 26 years old, of course, from Survivor 49, where he does place fourth, the final juror of the season, which means he played 25 days, won 6 challenges in the pre-merge, and only won one individual challenge. And technically, I put individual in quotes because it was part of a team challenge. Maybe another unfortunate weakness of a Rizzo's game is his lack of performance in challenges. He has repeated multiple times how cooked he is at puzzles, and he has been able to benefit from the fact that other people, which is essentially, his game in 49, is that other people next to him make so many mistakes that he's able to benefit off of, but may not necessarily come into play in the best light in 50, and only got 3 votes against him the entire season. And that's the thing, Liana, is that improbably there was this idea that right after the merge vote, which he's left out of, it's him and his 2 allies, one of which being Savannah, who's also going to be on this season, against the world. And through his idol tactics, through, specific wins happening with Savannah, as well as his other allies, through advantages both him and others were able to acquire, and through just like pure old maneuvering and duping the players into targeting others, he was able to make it all the way to the final 4. Now, the jury's out quite literally as to how he would do in the final 3. He has said that if he's sitting there at the end, especially without Savannah, he believes that he would essentially get Savannah's votes. I know that Soph, his other closest ally, has said differently, but he's still made an incredibly deep cut into Survivor 49. And so it is understandable that if you were picking 2 people from 49 to bring right back into 50, he would be one of them.
Right. Well, and I think also just the underdog storyline that Rizzo had coming into the merge, which you did mention, him and Savannah kind of side by side, fight in the fight, and managing to make their way through the entire merge. I think that that's something that is really captivating. A lot of times people want to root for the underdogs, and so having Rizzo with this big underdog story, I think, is really interesting to bring him back. One thing I did want to note about his age. So he's 26 years old. I will say he reads younger than 26.
Yes. The polo and the knee socks don't help. I will say that.
That is true. Why is he dressed like a toddler? But that's fine. Maybe that's part of the strategy, right? To be underestimated. And that's something that I think, we as the audience picked up on. It's something I know the casuals, we've talked about this with the Survivor Facebook page, they've picked up on as well. So because he also, not only is he the youngest, but also reads younger, I think that's going to help him get deep into the season. I think he's going to struggle then to command votes with sort of that, young person personality, unless the jury is amenable to awarding it to somebody who's younger.
I mean, who could he pull a reverse Sue May and reveal he's actually older than they think he is?
Yeah, exactly. Like, let me show you my AARP membership card, guys.
Well, Liana, what do you think is the defining move of Rizzo? What do you think is a moment from 49 that is most emblematic of who he is as a player?
Yeah. So for me, it's the fake out idol play. Like if I had to pick a Rizzo moment, that's the moment. I think because it encapsulates so many different things. So as we mentioned, Rizzo finds this idol early, holds on to it, but does
Despite
have
the fact
some.
that literally everyone in the
Yeah.
game by the merge knows he has an idol.
Oh, yeah. Everybody knows he has the idol. Everybody's talking about it. It's not like it's some sort of secret. And people are talking about gotta flush the idol, gotta flush the idol, gotta flush the idol. Ultimately, never ends up happening. He plays it, I guess, unsuccessfully at 5, but I would say that through the entire merge, he pretty much used that thing successfully. So I would say that that was a tool well used. But I think it was a moment, and I don't remember exactly which episode it was, but he goes up, he like does this fake out play, which is just such a showmanship moment. Yeah. And I think that that really encapsulates Rizzo. And I think that what's interesting is how that showmanship was perceived on 49 and how it might be perceived in 50, because he is sort of a loud out and about type character.
Yeah, it is interesting because I think there was a lot of discourse going into the finale about, can Rizzo win at the end? There was a lot of comparisons to Xander, because a lot of us were saying on the outside, why aren't you gunning for Rizzo? He has an idol. But certain jurors were saying in their exit press, oh, well, the reason why we didn't go for him is because like the idol was less of an obstacle and more of just like a nagging nuisance, you know, like an achy knee rather than a broken limb where you can just sort of like ignore it. It didn't necessarily matter. He said that the jury was not entirely enthused by his antics. I mean, even here, right, when it's during the final 8 vote, he gets up to play this idol. We assume it's going to be on Savannah, and then it turns out to be a fake. You could assign all these reasonings to it, right? Which is like, oh, maybe it's because he's trying to gauge, you know, a swing vote's mood to see if they actually voted with him. Maybe he's doing it to make people think that he had a fake the whole time. No, he said that he already had a fake prepared in case another person played their idol. And so he was just kind of doing it for the lulz. And this is where I think we talked about this in the Joe preview. The quick turnaround time might hurt him here because I don't know genuinely how much time he's had to reflect and hear from other people about the way he may be perceived.
Well, and that was the other thing too, right? I talked about Rizzo as a narrative, and what I'm looking out for when people talk about threat level, who's a threat. Are you talking about yourself as a threat, or are other people talking about you as a threat? And I think that that was a key distinction between Savannah and Rizzo, because for Savannah, people were talking about her as a threat, whereas Rizzo was talking about himself as a threat and as a good player. And so that difference of perception, the way he views himself versus the way that the other players viewed him, you need time to be able to understand all of that. And so if you are quickly going back and playing again, that doesn't happen. You don't see the story being told because they didn't even see themselves and how they came across on television. They didn't see necessarily how everybody was reacting. And so without having that full information, you know, I think a lot of times people just repeat the same game that they played before because it was like, well, I made it deep with that game, so I'm going to continue to do that, which doesn't necessarily give you time to potentially correct some of the mistakes or issues that your game may have had to play a more perfected game going into your next season.
Well, let's go from the issues side of things to more so the assets side of things. What do you think is Rizzo's biggest strength that is most applicable to Survivor 50?
He's a goofy guy. And I think that that is such a great strength because you've got winners. You have people who maybe somebody say should have been winners. You've got icons, all greats. Like these are players who are in the history of Survivor, like just so iconic. And then you got little old Rizzo like pulling up, and I think that's such an asset because if I'm one of these players out here, I'm looking at the rest of the cast. When am I voting out Rizzo? Like unless it comes to my attention that, oh my God, he's some amazing mastermind genius, but he even doesn't read mastermind genius when you first meet him. So I think he's going to have a great time connecting with people. I think he's going to make it deep. I think then the debate happens at the end, which sort of happened at the end of 49, which is, can he convert? Can he convert that sort of goofy persona into a win that people respect and want to reward, especially given the fact that it's 50? I don't know why, but in my head, I feel like the stakes are even higher to have a winner that people really want to look back on the season and be like, yes, that was our winner. They represented season 50.
Yeah, I think that when we look back in the history of people who have been brought back to back-to-back seasons where the cast did not know their body of work. You could say Rupert to a certain extent. They had watched a few episodes of Pearl Islands before All-Stars, but Russell Hantz is the first and maybe most prominent. example. You do have Zeke and Michaela in Game Changers. And when you look at that type of stuff, like they all have done at least pretty well. They've almost all, I believe they've all made the merge at least. And it's because when it comes to these returning player seasons, I think the initial beliefs are that the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. Or I guess worse in this case, and that because these other people, arguably, yes, the idea of two people coming in with blank resumes could be a scary thought. But then what you could sort of hang your hat on is more so what you have seen and what you have heard about these other people. And so, yeah, who knows? Rizo might have been $1 million winner who won the most immunity challenges in Survivor history and is one of the most dominant players we've seen in 25 years. But I know for a fact Ozzy's going to be impossible to beat in challenges. I know for a fact if you let Cirie get to the merge, she is dangerous. And so I could very easily see an outcome where this guy, once again, could be underestimated because, again, looking back to maybe the reason why he was cast, or one of the reasons, like, he presents as this young, excitable super fan. What's interesting is when he talked to me in the preseason for 49, there is this persona of the man, the myth, the legend, RIZGOD, Riz God, baby. And he said that's only for the confessionals. And he largely stuck to that. Like, the jury was stunned when, after Rizzo was eliminated in Fire, he said, like, Jeff, can you say Riz God, the tribe has spoken? And everyone's like, where the hell did this come from? So he did a good job of masking that. Now, as we get into the rest of the cast, here lies an interesting point, Liana, is that, yes, on the one hand, these players that do not necessarily have a point of reference are generally looked at as like enigmatic players, right? Like we don't necessarily know anything about them, so we can't base any opinions off of them based on their previous seasons. The one thing that the players of Survivor 50 watched of Survivor 49 before going out to play is the trailer for Survivor 49. In fact, they had watched it only a few weeks ago because it aired during the 48 finale, and they flew out to play in the beginning of June, end of May. Just as a reminder of how the 49 trailer opens, it is of a young man named Rizo Velovic declaring himself the man, the myth, the legend, RIZGOD, Riz God, baby. So it's almost like, Liana, we're going to be arriving at this discrepancy in reverse, in that in 49, this persona was contained to the confessionals, and so people did not largely know about, this bloviating personality he had until the very end. Now, that's all the returning players know. And so he's actually, I think, going to have to make up a bit of ground when it comes to this first impression, because not to spoil too much about my interviews, but not a lot of worshipers of the whole Riz God persona going into 50.
I think that's actually a really great point, because I look back to how I felt about him after watching the promo and was like, this clown. So, and it took, it didn't take that long, honestly, for me to be a full Rizzo stan, a worshiper, you can say, the house of the Riz God, but it definitely was jarring to have that be the introduction to Rizzo. He comes across in that confessional, and it's so funny. It's just a few seconds, but man, you're like, that is one cocky MFer. Like, that's how it comes across. And he's going to be basically trying to fight that. But I think similar to the way that Rizzo won over so many people after the promo going into the actual season of 49, I think he's going to be able to do the same thing here. I agree with you. It is going to be more of an uphill battle than potentially what he had going straight into 50 without that initial first impression. But he just seems so like fun and charismatic and lovely, and also authentically raw and emotional at times. And I think if he can pull on that, I think he'll have an easier path forward to reverse some of those initial first impressions.
And by the way, also going back to more players who played on back-to-back seasons without their original body of work having really been seen, we have James and Amanda, who only partially had China watch before Micronesia. Both made the merge. And Malcolm being another key example. Nobody knew Survivor Philippines from a hole in the wall. And he makes quite a cut in there and becomes the fan favorite. Now, the question is, who will be the favorite of Rizzo on this game? Now, there is one very easy answer to this, and it is the person that he nearly went to the end with, and he would have if he could have, if he wasn't facing off against her in fire making. Let's talk about Savannah, because what I find interesting, Liana, is that despite working so closely together pretty much from the very beginning, we got very little about the Rizzo-Savannah relationship itself. He opened up about it, and she did as well. In my exit press the day after the finale, he says that he considers Savannah like a big sister to him, that they got really, really close over their time on the island. So, of course, this is going to be a season that is full of a lot of these pre-existing pairs. And certainly, I think a lot of eyes will not only be on Rizzo, but the fact that he is coming in with somebody else. I do not think they are going to hide their closeness, nor should they, considering that they may need each other in this game.
Yeah, I absolutely echo that. I think one, they're definitely going to need each other. And I think what is in Rizzo's corner is the fact that Savannah is a bigger threat. Like, there's no way that they're going to be able to hide that Savannah won her season. I think that that is just going to be basically impossible. Additionally, Savannah was such a big physical threat. Now, whether or not it's going to come out that she tied the record, I have a feeling like Jeff Probst may mention it.
Imagine they're in it like this person has a chance of tying the record set by Kelly Wigglesworth, Chrissy Hoffbeck, Kim Spradlin, Rachel Lamont, and Savannah Louie.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's what I'm saying with Chrissy there as well, too, right? I mean, so I just feel like there's no way that she's going to be able to get out from under that, which I think means Savannah's definitely going to need Rizzo. And why would Rizzo turn down working with Savannah? Because, you know, and this happens all the time. Whenever you have a powerful duo, you always are going to look at eliminating the more powerful one first. And I think
probably not get rid of the other one if history is
exactly. And then that person has the chance to skate through. I think, not that this is the Kyle and Camilla pod, but I think that they're in a very similar boat, right? You have a winner, and then you have the, you know, the sidekick or perceived sidekick, which I will say. And so I think that Rizzo is absolutely going to benefit from that. You know, that being said, this is a cast of 24 people. So having one ally is not going to help you much. He's going to need to be able to make connections with other people. And I do think that we saw Rizzo bond with a wide variety of other players on Survivor 49. So I'm hoping that, given, you know, it's not just, oh, he only connects with this one sort of subgroup. I'm hoping that he'll be able to connect then with multiple people as well in 50, given the diversity of the cast.
Do you have any specific names in mind? I mean, what's interesting is that in my 49 preseason interview, Rizzo identified the members of his cast just sitting around at Ponderosa by comparing them to a previous Survivor player. So do you think, much like some people genuflect to the altar of the Riz god, that some people might take, you know, his own form of idol worship as a sign that he should be trusted?
Well, I mean, we've seen this happen in other seasons where fans are like, man, I really want to work with so-and-so, and then sidle up to them and end up, you know, working with them closely. So a Rizzo Sari pairing, obviously, would be absolutely amazing. Yes. You know, I think also Rizzo, I don't know how old Jared Fields is, but, you know, Rizzo potentially similar kind of bucket. So I think that that's absolutely a connection we could see. I think that Rizzo sucking up to
Jared
like
Fields
a coach
would also know who Mr. Beast is.
Exactly. Rizzo sucking up to like a coach or an Aussie, I could see that as well. I think that all of those, you know, what would be classified as potentially like legend players, I think Rizzo is going to try to interact with. Now, whether or not they'll reciprocate, Coach will love it. Coach will be like, yes, dote on me. Like, now Colby may find Rizzo exceptionally annoying and want him to be nowhere near him.
I don't know. Well, there's also this idea that, again, if he's able to play up the youth angle, I think there could be something to some of these people like Colby and Coach, especially, that are like, come, young one, let me teach you the ways of the world, both Survivor and otherwise.
Exactly. See, I think that's like the key distinction. It could go one of two ways. It's like either this little fly won't leave me alone, I wish I could just smack him out of the air, or yes, I will teach you everything I know, right? So it's just a matter of what direction that's going to go. Is he going to be annoying and he's going to rub people the wrong way? Or are people going to be flattered that he's there to just soak up all their knowledge?
Well, let's turn to the other side of things. I know you said there were a lot of possibilities with some of these old schoolers, but are you thinking about anyone in particular from any era that might turn into one of Rizzo's ups early on?
Ooh, that's a good point. I genuinely think, I don't know how people like Jonathan or maybe Joe or Colby are going to interact with him. I don't know how Jenna is going to, or Stephanie even, is going to feel about Rizzo. I could see Tiffany being super annoyed with him as well. Like, I'm really looking for people who would be like, who would be annoyed by Rizzo? Not who would
Hmm.
necessarily think of him as like, oh, this guy's a threat, we need to get rid of him. But it's like, man, this guy annoys me. I do not want to work with him. I feel like that's where his ops are going to come from.
I mean, what's interesting is that we got the Nate situation in 49, where he was very much experiencing a generation gap, where everyone
Mhm.
around him was saying things were vibes and fire. And that was largely led by Rizzo. He is one of the most Gen Z coded cast members we have ever had in Survivor history. And so I think that's just who he is as a person. And as you mentioned, I think depending on who he's around, if he uses that vernacular, it's almost the opposite situation where like now he's going to be the one that might be a bit isolated because you have some of these people in their 30s and 40s sitting around like, what the hell is a mukbang?
Or just, yeah, exactly, just not being able to understand him, right? Like, what are you talking about? Like, I mean, that's an interaction I'm absolutely waiting for. So I'm really hoping for that. Again, though, because he's got so many teeth and he just smiles and it's so bright.
He's got so many
So,
teeth.
no, like when he
Full
smiles, like
32.
he's got all, and you can see every single one of them when he smiles. But that's the thing is like he smiles, and there's something really charming and disarming about him. And I just
Hmm.
think that younger brother moniker, I think, is so perfect. I think that that's how a lot of people are going to feel about him as, oh, tell me what the kids are saying kind of thing, right? Like, and I think that is just so disarming, and I would never think of that to be a threat.
Yeah. Maybe my hot take is he's the one that actually convinced Genevieve to go public on Instagram.
Yes, he's like, girl, you have to.
He's like, listen, I'll run the TikTok, own the fan cams, make them proprietary. Let's make you get another million here.
Exactly. The branding expert. RIZGOD.
Well, Liana, let's talk about branding Rizzo as one particular commendation. How will Rizo Velovic win Survivor 50?
Ooh. What is Rizzo's path to the end?
Yeah.
I think Rizzo's path starts with reversing that initial impression as this cocky know-it-all. I think if he can shift from there to the goofy younger brother, I think that's the start. From there, he really needs to work on his social relationships in order to show that he's not just that goofy kid. Because as I mentioned before, I think his biggest challenge is going to be convincing people to vote for him at the end.
Mm.
Well, that, and I mean, yeah, he's not going
No,
to.
I think the final four round is going to be the toughest for him. This is something I forecasted even back in 49 because we knew that like the two things he wasn't great at were challenges and maybe assumingly fire, considering that as he says in the finale, he's made like maybe two out there. And as he talked about with me, he took his, very short break between seasons to do things like, recharge, spend time with his family, get his body back in like some sort of nutritionally stabilized condition before going out again. He wasn't really practicing fire or puzzles. And so that's the tough thing is that Rizzo can get by with, getting a lot of support through allies, through making these sort of behind the scenes pitches the way that he was during the Alex vote, for instance. But I do feel like we could see it maybe a bit of a repeat situation in that when it gets down to those final couple rounds where you have to like primarily rely on yourself. Now, maybe, Liana, as you mentioned, if he plays up this youthful, energetic label enough, he could skip fire making altogether and ask to get taken instead.
That's what I think is the optimal route for him, is that he just gets taken and then is able to, pull one over on the jury and basically say, no, this is how serious I was. And I did these things on purpose and yada, yada, yada. Because I do agree with you. Look, you're not going to just all of a sudden overnight get good at the individual immunity challenges. So that's out the window. So then his two options for making the final three are either win fire making or get taken by the winner of that final immunity challenge. The one thing that I'm hoping for is that that's what Rizzo knew went wrong with his game, right? Because we talked about having that time in between to be able to reflect and prepare and think about how you would want to do things better. He knows he lost at fire making. The man was there. He saw the thing not snap, right? So he knows that he didn't win. So if you're thinking, if I'm going to correct one thing going into my game, it is that I am going to practice fire making. Now, I know he didn't do it in the downtime, but maybe out on the island, he'll get some opportunities to practice because that was, I mean, and potentially from his eyes, the one thing that prevented him from winning.
Mm.
So if that was the one thing, why would you not work on the one thing that prevented you from winning?
Two birds, one stone. You go over to one of these old school players and say, like, gosh, I was just out here, but I really struggled making fire. Coach, can you teach me how to make a fire? Then you're in deference to the old school players while
Mhm.
also acquiring a key skill without necessarily coming across as like, you don't want to face me in fire. I'm too good. You wouldn't want to go from the Rizzo to the Christina.
Exactly, exactly, because then you get voted out earlier.
Yep.
We saw with Christina. So yeah, you got to be non-threatening enough, but also practicing. And maybe he can do it with multiple people. Hey, Ozzy, would you teach me how to make fire? Hey, Coach, would you teach me how to make fire? And then being able to, have a lot of practice out there, so then he can at least go in with slightly more confidence into the Final Four fire making, if he can manage to get there in the first place and isn't voted out for being the annoying younger brother in the pre-merge.
Well, this podcast was straight fire. I hope that those of you that did not check out the new Era 49 in particular got a little bit of a crash course in Rizzo, because I do agree with you, Liana, that I think given past precedent for back-to-back players, as well as, again, the way that Rizzo is able to carry himself in person, I actually do feel like he's got a bit of longevity in this game. I do not think he is as cooked as maybe people might have thought, and probably will hear in advance when you hear a lot of people talking about how much they did not like the Rizzo in that teaser, because that is not the Rizzo they'll largely live with on the island. So thank you, Liana, for coming on, talking about, one of the biggest mystery players of Survivor 50 and doing your part, donning your detective hat to solve the mystery for us.
I mean, any opportunity to talk about the man, the myth, the legend, RIZGOD, Riz God baby. Of course, I had to take it. And thank you, Mike, for walking us through and doing all of these deep dives, for getting us ready for Survivor 50.
Well, the pleasure is all mine. Of course, Liana, we are still in the wait for season 50, but you got plenty on your plate going on here in the long winter months. What would you like to plug for the listeners out there?
Yes. So Puya and I are chugging along with the Puya and Liana Lounge, the pal, puyaandliana.com. If you want to check all of that fun stuff out, I'm sure we're going to be talking about all things reality TV. Traders will be going on. Survivor 50 is going to be coming up. So there's a lot for us to discuss, as well as just keeping up with our daily lives and all the goofy antics that we get up to.
All right. Well, you can check in with me next time when we will be talking about Rizzo's on island sister, fellow alliance mate, and the winner of season 49, Savannah Louie. It'll be another conversation, less so than Rizzo, certainly less visible in that Survivor 49 teaser, but there's certainly a lot left to the imagination for these other players as to who Savannah is and why she was brought back. But we'll bring some reality to that imagination as we talk about her dominant winning game on season 49 and what that can mean for 50. Let us know your thoughts in the comments about Rizzo. What do you think his chances are appearing back to back here? Do you think he might fall into some of the same traps? How will everyone look at this man who called himself the Riz God in a promo not 2 weeks before they flew out on the island? Only time will tell. We shall find out, I guess, starting on February 25th and beyond when Survivor 50 arrives on our screens. Thank you all, as always, so much for listening. Liana, thank you so much for your fantastic appearance. Until next time, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.
This is RHAP. We know reality TV.